And here we go. Okay, so welcome to class number 73. I titled this class, finding yourself and finding God. And my wife called it something. What do you call it?
Don't believe the masquerade.
Don't believe the masquerade, which also fits. So one of the prayers that we say every day during Elul, the month before Rosh Hashana, to prepare ourselves for the holiday of Rosh Hashana, is one of the Psalms, Psalm number 27 of King David, which he said when he was a refugee running away from King Shaul under the death sentence, and having a place to hide and no rest. And it's a very moving prayer. I'll give you a little bit of taste of it at the beginning. We'll explain how that really might help us there. So it starts out, the David Hashem Ori, right? David Hashem Ori. The Lord is my light and my help. Yishi Mimi Ira, who will be afraid of. My God is my stronghold. Who shall I dread? Because of Eli, when wicked people come to me, let Holocaust, right, to eat my flesh. Enemies, foes, who stumble and fall. No, I didn't share it.
So he has
I'm just reading it out loud. If an army should beseech me, if my heart, I would have no fear, etc. Then it comes to the point line. One thing that I ask from Hashem, Me'et Hashem do I ask. Otavakesh, this is my request. Shifti beveit Hashem, that I should sit in the house of Hashem kol yimei chaya, the whole days of my life. Lachazo, to see the pleasantness of Hashem, Lavaka b'cheichalo, and to see His temple. Okay, sounds very nice. That's all he asked for. And then he goes on and he asks for more and more and more things, because once you start asking, you start asking for everything. So he said, the only one thing I asked for, but he can't stop. Okay, that's the first question. Why does he keep going on and on and on? The other question is very interesting. The Medrash, which we usually use to understand Tehillim, there's a rabbi named Abba Shul, and he says that David wasn't just asking for when you're a refugee, like, I just want to have a day of peace. I just want to stop having to run each day. I want a roof over my head. I'd just like to not die by the sword. He asked for Malchus. He asked to be king. And that's a very strange question. Why does he say that? And the commentators go crazy. They say there's no hint at that at all, that he's asking for kingship there. He's just asking for, please save me. That's all he's really asking for.
Who says he's asking for kingship?
Abba Shul. They say that the reason is sort of a technical reason. It says, he says, Shifti beveit Hashem, to sit in the house of Hashem. Now, there's a rule that when you go on top of the Temple Mount, when you go to the temple, you're not allowed to sit. Everybody has to stand except for one person, who is the king. The king is the only person who's allowed to actually sit in the courtyard of Hashem. So he says, because of that, that's what he was asking for. That's how he reads it. But the question is really deeper than that. And that's where we're going to go. When you think everything is going bad, for two reasons. One thing, people give up hope. I don't think it's Surrey. I think it's
okay, so don't say, just mute something.
Okay. It's people give up. People stop caring. People stop caring that they don't care. People really, just give up on themselves and just say, there's nothing, life is not going to really change. My life is basically what it is. I'm just lucky if I just can keep hold on to what I've got. There are various other reasons that people just, after a number of years, they just stop believing that they'll have a wonderful marriage, they'll have children, whatever, that they need. They have good relationship with their family. The list goes on. And people just, really lose that youthful enthusiasm that everything is possible. And Rosh Hashana is supposed to teach us that now we have a springboard, an opportunity to make a completely new year, and it doesn't have to go any more than what we can go completely. You're unlimited. You're a piece of godliness. King David never gave up on himself. In the worst situation, he's thinking of becoming king. How did he do it? The trick is, the answer is, so it says in Moshe, it says in Parshas, Parsha what?
This week?
No, not actually this week. It was back in Parsha, Ve'elach, I think. Ve'elach. He says, what? Yeah. That he will search from them there. What is from there? So the commentators explain. It says, when you lose something, where do you look for it? You look for where you lost it. There's a story about the wise men of Chelm. I told this to you on Shabbos. This is a story from the wise men of Chelm. There was one time a guy who was walking and he sees one of his friends in the city of Chelm. The Chelm people used to tell funny stories about themselves. They really were big scholars, and you'll see they were really trying to give very deep messages. He sees his friend, it's nighttime, and the guy's looking for something. And he says, what you looking for? He says, I lost my keys. He says, yeah, where'd you lose it? He said, a couple blocks away. He says, why are you looking here? He says, because the street lights are here, the lights are better. You're not going to find things where things are light. Sometimes you have to go find things when things are dark, you know? There's another joke that's told about two guys sitting in a hospital. Both of them had gouts. One was a Jew, one was a non-Jew. The first time the doctor goes to the non-Jew and he says, can I have your injured leg? And the guy fills out his leg. And the doctor starts probing it to see what's going on with it. And of course, the guy is screaming and yelling because gout is extremely painful. And every movement is really very painful. And the guy is yelling his head off. And after a while, the doctor finishes his examination. Then he asks the Jew for his leg. So he says, give me your injured leg. So he gives him a leg. And the doctor is pushing it and probing it and stretching it. And the guy is not doing anything. After it's done, the non-Jew says to the Jew, he says, I don't understand. You're the biggest sissy of all. The slightest pain, you start screaming. How did you manage to control yourself? The Jew says to him, you think I gave him the injured foot? I gave him the one with gout? Yours not. So sometimes you have to face the difficulties. Sometimes you have to go into that place where the problem is. That's where you're going to find the strength. That's where you're going to find the ability. You have to confront your demons. You have to be able to face them. Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson said this week, he had an interesting talk the last week. He had a conversation with a bunch of teenage girls, religious girls. They formed a group. It's called My Team. And these are girls who have chronic illnesses. They're not dying, but they have tremendous diseases and very difficult situations in life. And they asked them some very, very hard questions, challenging questions, sometimes angry questions. And, he says, basically, I can't explain to you pain and punishment, but I'll tell you one thing. It's very interesting. The people who when you're suffering, the people who really can answer you, who really have the authority and the ability for you to listen to, are people who've been in that situation themselves. Only somebody who's really gone through a very harsh situation, who's gone through a lot of pain, that they have the ability to really cut through all the layers, and you actually listen to them because they know what they're talking about. For example, if you go to a young couple that has pushing a stroller with a little baby, they may have a lot of theories about how you're supposed to raise a child. And they can tell you, we read the books and we studied it, and we know everything about it. And their parents and their grandparents will say, yeah, wait till you grow up. Because you haven't been there. Until you've been there, until you've gone into that situation, you really don't have the ability to answer. This doesn't answer the problem of why there are people who suffer. This doesn't answer the reason why people have a lot of pain. I'm not trying to say that. But what I am saying is that let me pin myself. No, I'm just going to pin myself. Okay, good. 1 second. Just a little bit of noise in the background. Yes. Okay, good. What I am trying to say is And I think what he was trying to say is that really, it's only the people who really experience something that they really know, they're able to talk with authority. And there's a cute story about this. The story goes as follows. The Chernobyl Rebbe Nachum of Chernobyl, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, so it's like 250 years ago. He was once traveling, and his mission on this trip was something called Pidyon Shavuim. In those days, many times in the Middle Ages, the non-Jewish authorities would capture a Jew, especially if he had money or his family had money, throw him in prison and demand a tremendous ransom for whatever reason that they wanted. They didn't have to they could fabricate pretty much anything that they wanted to. And courts still do that, unfortunately. Sometimes people get really messed over by the legal system. So anyway, so he was going around collecting money and releasing people from prison, returning them back to their family, innocent people. While he was doing this, somebody thinked on him, and he ended up in the prison. And he was very distressed. And one day he was in the cell and he was crying out to Hashem, saying, this is what I get. I mean, I'm doing your work. I'm trying to get people out of prison. And instead, myself am in prison. There happened to be a Ukrainian cleaning woman who was going around between the cells, sweeping up and so forth. And she sees him and she sees he's very distressed. And she says, I see you're very upset about something. Care to tell me about it? He looks. This is a big rabbi, big tzaddik, and she asked, but it's just this Ukrainian cleaning woman with, who's just sweeping. For some reason, he decides he tells her, and he says, I help save people from prison, innocent people. I am innocent, and look what's happened to me. I am innocent, and this is how God is treating me. I don't understand. So the Ukrainian cleaning woman says to him, and she says, have you forgotten Parshas Lech Lecha? He goes, what? Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha is the very third Parsha in the Chumash. It's God telling Avraham, Lech Lecha, go to yourself from your land, from your country, to the place where I will show you. Lech Lecha. It's the first message to the Jewish people, to the first Jew of the Jewish people. Lech Lecha. So anyway, she doesn't say that, but she says, so he asks, Lech Lecha, what? He was surprised, but maybe, a Catholic lady, maybe she knows something and so forth. What am I supposed to learn from this? She says, do you know the Rashi there? The Rashi. This is getting very interesting. What Rashi? She says, Lech Lecha. Rashi is the classic commentator on the Chumash. So he says, Lech Lecha, she says to him, Lech Lecha means go to yourself, meaning this is for your benefit. I am sending you on a mission for your benefit. He says, how does that relate to my story? He says, come on. Avraham this is her statement, Avraham, what was he known for? He was known as the Mr. Hospitality. Everybody used to come to his house and he took care of everybody. He fed them. He clothed them, he took care of them, he asked them to thank Hashem, but he was that was his mission in life, was being, the home for refugees and people wandering who didn't have a home. And therefore, how do you really instill in a person a feeling for somebody else who's homeless? So God gave him, so the lady says, God gave him sent him on a mission. He made Avraham a refugee. He says, Lech Lecha, go and be a refugee. Then you will be able to really relate, and you will be able to make a good house and a refuge and a comfort for people. But if you don't know what it means to be homeless, you won't really be very good at being a place of refuge for other people. And she continues and she says, and that's what God has done with you. He says, you're trying to rescue people from prison. And therefore, God said, oh, you want to be a person who has sympathy and empathy and rahmanas on people in prison. So therefore, he put you in prison so you'll be able to feel the situation. He goes, whoa, a Torah from a Ukrainian cleaning woman. Afterwards, he's released. And he goes to his teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, and as soon as he opens the door, the Baal Shem Tov says, so how does it feel to be able to get a Torah lesson from Sarah Imenu, from Sarah, our mother? That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. Because if you know anything about Hasidic tales, and in truth, it is many times that Abraham and Sarah didn't abandon the Jewish people. And they come disguised sometimes, but they give messages. So but the point of the story, I think, is very apropos, which is that, we look at our troubles and our difficulties, but there really are the truth. Our difficulties, but they give you the authority and the ability to answer people. And I think the girls actually heard this, and they said, wow. There's another example of this that comes from Rabbi Avigdor Miller. He says, the hardest thing about a peach tree is the peach pit. So when the peach tree you can crack and you can do anything, but the peach pit is really hard, and don't try and bite on it. It's really hard. But it's interesting. The fruit ability to continue the peach tree is actually inside the pit. So what you got to do is you got to put it in the dirt. And then so all of a sudden the hammers wouldn't break it. But you know what? You put it in the dirt and all of a sudden it opens up. That's what causes the new tree to occur. It's the same theme again. It sometimes is, we're looking at our situation and we're right, and our friends say we're right. It's terrible what's happening right now, and you should say that, and you shouldn't just try and override it. And you have to be empathetic to people, and you have to say, yeah, but you know what? there is something that comes out of this, and that is, what? You really become something special. So So really, to hammer the thing home, this is coming again from Rabbi YY. He said a very interesting story. There was a rabbi who was for many years, I guess until recently, he was the chief rabbi of the city of Antwerp. Where's Antwerp? Antwerp is in Holland? Or is it Belgium? Belgium. Thanks, Belgium. And I'm losing my geography. I was just be good at that. Anyway, Antwerp, Belgium. Anyway, his name is escapes me now. Anyway, this chief rabbi was actually a Holocaust survivor. He tells the story, true story about himself. He says he was growing up in Germany, and he was a young man, a bacher, unmarried, and the situation looked very bad there. And a Jew, a very rich Jew, came over to him once, and he told him, he said, listen, I'm on my mark to be on the next transport to one of the concentration camps. And I don't think that I'm going to be able to survive the war, but something tells me that you might very well. So I'm going to tell you something. I have taken a tremendous amount of money, tremendous riches, and I have saved it in a Swiss bank. And I want to give over to you the passwords and the keys and the number of the bank so that you'll be able to, after the war, if you find one of my relatives, you'll be able to tell them all this information so that you'll be able to give the money to them. I want you to remember it. This guy was a big Talmud Chacham, and he had a very good memory. So he did. He remembered the money, and he did manage to survive the war. And he didn't take the money himself, but he remembered the codes, and he went to Antwerp. So there he was in Antwerp, and years went by. 25 years later, he happens to be in shul one morning, and he's putting away, he's after davening, it's after the prayers, and he's putting away his talis and his tefillin, and a guy comes into the shul. Listen to that. A guy comes into the shul, and it's one of these, what they call schnorrers. You know what a schnorrer is, asking for money, tzedakah, tzedakah, tzedakah. And this guy looked extremely poor. So the rabbi gives him the money, but he says he's very nice usually to these people. And he sees this guy is literally in rags. His clothes are terrible. He's thin. He asks him who he is and his name, where he's from. And he says the last name, and he says, wait a minute, that rings a bell 25 years later. Now, he doesn't say anything to him because it was a tremendous amount of money, but he asks him, he says, how long are you in town for? He says, 2 weeks. So he figures he has time to do a little research. And so each day he gets a little bit of information from the guy, and he starts checking him out. And he finally comes to the conclusion after a few days that, you know what, I think I'm really confident this guy is the son of the guy who passed away in the Holocaust. So the next day he calls him in and he says, you know what, I got something news to tell you. You're not poor. You are a multimillionaire. The guy says, don't tell me any mices. Don't tell me any stories. What do you mean, a multimillionaire? He says, yeah. And then he tells him a story about his father and how the code, and he writes down on a piece of paper all the information. He says, listen, you should be giving me money. Here, take this information and go to Switzerland and go to the bank, and you'll find out whether the thing is true. And of course, he went and he was a multimillionaire, and he transformed himself. And the rabbi tells the story over to the person who he was relating it to, and he says, you learn a very interesting thing from this story. A person can be a multimillionaire, can be the richest person in wisdom, in money, in wealth, in ideas. And you know what? He has no clue. He's walking around in rags. So you can be in a situation that really feels terrible to you. And it's right. And everybody would say, he's just a storer. He's in a terrible situation. And you know what? The reality is that there's a tremendous amount of wealth there, and you can utilize it. You can capitalize on it. I think that is a very strong message to go into the holiday of Rosh Hashana for, and what we need to ask for, and how we're going to ask for it, and how we're going to talk to Hashem. Don't come in as a beggar. Don't come in as like, I need, and I'm really worried, and I'm so. No. You're a child of Hashem. You are part of. He's vested everything in you. All 70 trillion cells. He is constantly keeping going, and he is involved in your life, and he wants you to succeed. And you can ask as a king. You don't have to ask. One thing you can ask for is you can ask for it as a king. You can say, listen, this is your mission. And just let it become the reality of what I see it, currently, rather than what seems to be going around. And you'll find that you have that power. So I'm going to wish everybody, since it is going to be Rosh Hashana, Ksiva, V'chasima, Lashana Tovo, Masuka, you should be written and inscribed for a happy and healthy new year. And with that, I hope I was clear, and I think I'm going to turn over the camera to my wife, who's going to have her inspiring class to give. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Shana
Tova. Right.
Thank you so much, Yasher Koach.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So today's been such a nice day for me. 8:30 in the morning. Thank God I was dressed. I get a call from the rabbi of my shul. I found out 9 days ago that I'm teaching first grade in addition to kindergarten, and school starts tomorrow. So, and I've been so busy. So 8:30 in the morning, I get a call from the rabbi. I'm so happy I was dressed. He said, "Where are you? You're supposed to be here doing the davening with the kids. It's 8:30. I said, "But my director told me that we don't start till tomorrow." He said, "She's wrong." I asked the preschool director, and she didn't realize that the elementary this year starts a day earlier. So, it's been such an adorable day. Just like running from one thing to the next and relying on God and seeing God's kindness. So,
How are your new students?
Delicious. I had half of them last year because I had them in kindergarten. And I have 2 new kids in first grade, only 2 new kids in first grade. And I have a room full of people that I don't know in kindergarten. So it should be fun. And those are my 2 favorite grades. I just think there's nothing like them on the face of this earth. So they're both foundational grades.
Are you teaching full days now?
No, I teach a half day, but I teach like no prep time. Straight through. So okay. Does anybody want to say anything before I begin?
You look beautiful tonight. You do.
That's so funny.
I guess I just want to dovetail on You Hashem and say
Yeah.
that Just a Shana Tova to you and to everyone in the class and in the group, and just to thank you for having been an inspiration for us all year. And that when we think about who we want to be in the new year and during this time of remaking the world, that you make all of us kind of raise our consciousness higher and to want to be better. And I just really appreciate how much these Monday night talks and classes have lifted us all up. So it should double back on you for next year to be doing your work and shining brightly and have all that you give come back to you in multiple forms. So.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Beautifully
I just
said.
want to say that it's a lifeline. You know, somebody once said the class is a lifeline, and I have to say it's a lifeline for me too. And it's a lifeline for You Hashem. It's a lifeline for all of us, all the participants. So, because you know, it's the words of Torah. Torah is oxygen. There's nothing like it. Okay, so first I'll start out with the 4 things. Does anybody else have anything to say? Okay, so I'm going to start out with the 4 things that I usually start out with, which is number 1, we're in an extraordinary time. Absolutely extraordinary. It's I keep trying to figure out how Hashem is going to write the last chapter, you know, like when you reach the end of a murder mystery, and it's totally eluding me. But I know because the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us 30 years ago, Lubavitcher Rebbe told us that the redemption of the Jewish people and the world has begun to unfold. And therefore, all the craziness that is in this world today, all the divisiveness, all the everything are symptoms of this. It looks terrible, but it's actually just like a murder mystery. We're going to be astounded with the denouement, whatever it's called. So anyway, the second thing I like to say is that we, all of us, are handpicked to be in this time. Because we have a role to play, a vital role. And it's important that we learn Torah, because with the learning of Torah, you'll know what to do in this time. The third thing I like to say is that Hashem didn't leave us alone. He gave us tools. He gave us the Torah, which is, you know, the elixir of life. He gave us mitzvahs, which are, you know, and they enable us to be who we were meant to be. They bring out your inner potential. And he gave us leaders like Moses in his time and like the Rebbe in our time. And the last thing I like to say is that what we do tonight furthers the process of redemption. Lubavitcher Rebbe also said that the fastest way to speed up the redemption is to learn about it. So I want to say that Rosh Hashana, we're preempted next week, as you know, by Rosh Hashana, and so almost exactly when we start our class, that's when you're going to be, or a few minutes before, 8 minutes before, at 6:52, that's when you're going to be lighting your candles for Rosh Hashanah. And of course, make sure to do it at the right time, because after sunset, it's the opposite of a good thing. So, anyway, I want to say that Rosh Hashanah is a pivotal holiday for me. You know that the holidays have their own energy. And each time they come around, we experience the original energy of Rosh Hashanah, but on a higher level. Each time it's like a spiral that you come back to the same point, but at a higher level. So, yes. So on Rosh Hashanah, for me, 35 years ago, that's when I decided that, you know, I'd already looked around a lot in life. I had been an investigative reporter. I had gone and seen all different kinds of people. And as I said in a recent class, when I saw the frum community, I said, oh no, it's them. I don't want to do that. And, but I couldn't not do it. The evidence was so amazing. So 35 years ago, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, it became a foregone conclusion. I decided this is where my life is going. And as I said already, by that point, I'd seen so many things. I'd seen that the Torah observant world was exactly the opposite of the way it's painted. I understand there's a new serial that really paints it bad. And but you have to know that that's the stereotype, and the reality is the opposite of the stereotype. it's completely contrary to the image that the media pays of it. Really, the Torah world is a bunch of self-actualizers, and there is no community like the Torah community. There's just nothing like it on the face of this earth. And I had seen many different segments of the world by then, and the generosity is phenomenal, even of average people, and every single one of them is like pushing the achievement envelope. So, and some people, I've told you this before, some people, like one of my Rebbitzins, I had her picture here, but I don't see it now. So kind, you could write easily, sorry, knew her, Mrs. Goldworm, so kind, so phenomenally kind, so out of this world kind, that you could write a children's fable about her without any exaggeration. And my niece and my sister once had the pleasure of visiting me at Mrs. Goldworm's house, and they're down to earth people, my sister and my niece. My niece was like 7 at the time, or 9, something like that. And just the way they were immediately treated, they came out of there and said, Mrs. Goldworm is not normal. She's just, and there's a lot of people, maybe not on her level, but there's a lot of people like that. So, and also when you see people who are living a life of Torah and mitzvahs, even though I think I was a much coarser person back then, it was palpable even to me. There were moments of such holiness that you could cut it with a knife. It was so apparent. So anyway, 35 years ago on the second day of Rosh Hashana, I made this major decision, and it was, one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. And also Torah is not a all or nothing thing. Every little bit of Torah that you incorporate into your life adds light and life into your life. It's an immeasurable good, and you don't need the rest of it. You can take one piece, you can take another piece, and each piece has its own value. So anyway, the topic for tonight in my little half is don't believe the masquerade. And neither the masquerade, there's 2 masquerades that are going on. One is in the world as at large, and one is within your own being, the war that goes on within yourself. So in the world at large, the masquerade is that there is no God. And there are so many ways to see through that masquerade. One way, believe it or not, is anti-Semitism. It is inexplicable. We've been subject to anti-Semitism when we were poor, when we were rich, when we were powerful, when we were helpless, when we lived in this country, when we lived in that country, when we ran away to this country, when we ran away to that country. Even America, for many years, seemingly the bastion of acceptance. Even Americans, you won't read about it in the secular press because I have to say, in this administration, it's not acceptable to say that anything is wrong. The press doesn't say anything wrong. So not that I'm against the administration. I'm just saying that that's one thing that's the press is so allied with they're so in step with the administration that they don't. The New York Times did not find the repeated stabbing of a gun and knife wielding terrorist on the stairs of my school. Didn't find it interesting, didn't want to write about it. And many other incidents. I find out about shocking things about anti-Semitism that I never knew. There was a kid who was just murdered in his yeshiva in Denver. Did anybody know that? By an active gunman. Did anybody even read about it?
When did it happen?
Recently. And it's just shocking. It's just shocking. The press.
I was trying to remember where I heard about it, and now I'm thinking you're the one who told us. That's the only reason why I learned about it.
It's shocking. It's so uninteresting to the press. So anyway, and all the stuff about Israel is totally backwards. As somebody who went to Israel to investigate and was shocked by my own conclusions, this is not what the press is reporting. And I was a very liberal Jew at that point. So card-carrying liberal. So anyway, not that I'm not anymore, but I was a real card-carrying liberal back then. So anyway, anti-Semitism is a sign. What are the Jews? We're told in the Torah what the Jews are. You are a signpost of Hashem in the world. And we were told that we will be persecuted throughout the ages. I mean, this document was written 3,000 years ago. And even if you believe the Bible critics who say it was written 2,500 years ago, it's a long time ago. And yet it is perfectly true. We have been persecuted the whole time. The Torah said you're going to remain small, you're going to be persecuted, yet you're going to be a light to the nations. Those things are contradictory. How can such a thing be? If you're few in number, nobody knows about you. If you're the object of tremendous persecution, nobody learns from you. But it's true. The Jews are, anyway. So Jews are a signpost for God, and we are eternal. No matter what happens to us, no matter what devastating thing happens to us, the Jewish people survive. So anyway, so when the world says there is no God, there are so many proofs of God. And another proof I have to say, because I started school, if you look into the face of a Jewish child, you cannot help but see God. You cannot help. And especially if they're whatever. It's an amazing thing. You can see the holiness. Okay. Anyway, so
could I give a quick example of that?
Yes, please.
2 days ago, things were looking so bleak with this airlift, out of Afghanistan, and as of now, it's complete with all of the troops removed safely. Apart from the horrific event of yesterday, but the remaining ones were safely out, which was a big worry for people. But I mean, you could have looked at it 2 days, it was like the hurricane, and you would think like, oh my God, all this terrible chaos is going on. And then all of a sudden it's complete. There are people left behind, and we have to pray that those people will get out if they need to, but the change in the tone of the whole thing in a couple of days was, the ease when they were expecting much more, it to be a lot worse than it was, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's perfect or anything like that, or making a political judgment about it in any way. I'm just saying that from the chaos that was going on and the stress around it, there's just that nothing else happened, is what's amazing. That's really what it is that it's almost like God opened up a path for the rest of it to go the way it needed to go. No, without any judgment about the whole thing, but just that, just like with the hurricane too, that so many people, it was so terrifying to so many, and yet, I don't know. We don't know what the outcome is because they haven't done all of the search and rescue yet, but still many people are still here, who sat through it in their homes. So it's, I don't know, that's just with what we're seeing, how we see the terror, we see the fear of what's coming and what might come and everything. And then we see that there are many people who get through it, like walking on coals or something, That's really the point that I was making.
Very nice point. It was like absolutely preposterous to think that Jews would ever be let out of Russia. And Lubavitcher Rebbe, as I've told you before, he said on the day that Gorbachev took office, the Jews are coming out, start building housing, and it was preposterous. It was an absolutely preposterous statement. Even Gorbachev acknowledged later it was a preposterous statement, because Gorbachev didn't intend to do what he ended up doing. And it was so repressive. I started to read a book by Rabbi Rafael Kahn, and about what is, and he had I don't know, a relatively mild case of how they threw him in prison and all that stuff. I just couldn't sleep. It was so horrible. It was so horrible. And nobody could imagine that, exactly as the Rebbe said, not only did they let them out, but they even helped pay for them to go to Israel. They helped them, they assisted them, and they eventually koshered the Kremlin for Jewish events. They gave the former communist meeting halls for Pesach Seders. It's a fairy tale, an absolute fairy tale. And we're going to see the same fairy tale with the world at large. So same fairy tale come true. So anyway, so that's one masquerade is on a world level. The other masquerade is within our own being. We have an internal masquerade. We have our internal charlatan, who is so busy trying to distract us from God and Torah and mitzvahs. And how does he do it? Now, in the world at large, he keeps people busy. Each person has their own yitzhar, their own sabotaging inclination that keeps a person so busy with stress or so busy with nonsense. Some people are so busy accumulating possessions, accumulating fame. They're running after something with all their heart and soul, and they're missing the best part of life. They're missing the elixir of life, which is Hashem, which is a relationship with Hashem, which is knowledge of Hashem. And the Yetzer just keeps people busy. So just don't think. Because if you start to think, if a Jew particularly starts to think, we're programmed. We have a searching instinct inside us. Every Jew is programmed, no matter how far from, I wasn't brought up in a Torah home. My parents had been from before the war, but I had no clue about it until I started to become interested in Torah myself. They didn't talk about it. And every Jew, even if you're in Timbuktu, God gave every Jew a searching mind to find him and to find Torah. So the Yetzer, if you already know about God, so how is the Yetzer busy with you? The Yetzer is busy by saying, the Yetzer is busy saying, hey, you know that Hashem, he's your worst enemy. Look at all the things that are happening to you. He's your worst enemy. Really, the Yetzer is your worst enemy. He's put the shoe on the other foot, and he makes it seem like God is our enemy. Like, oh, look what he's doing to you now, Shalom is Yehudis. Oh my gosh, what are you gonna do? And the answer is to turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, this came from you. Yetzer's right. This comes from you, but because it comes from you, I know that it's good. And Hashem, I'm thank you for it. Thank you for whatever's happening to me, because if it's happening to me, it means it's from you and it means it's good. But help me with it also. And it's these two things are expressed in Hebrew about Hoda'ah al ha'avar the Bakasha ala asid. What do? We thank Hashem for whatever already happened. We thank him because if it happened, it's from him, and if it's from him, she, and if it happened already, it's Hashem's will, and everything Hashem does is good. So we thank him for it, even if it blows our mind. We thank him for it, and in the next breath, we ask him for what we want for the future. So. And that process itself, as we talked about last week, that process itself of thanking God for the bad stuff is so powerful. It is one of the most powerful things I've ever done. And did I mention that in the last class, I told you the story in the last class about, if you missed it, you have to go back and you have to hear at the end of the class, you have to hear the ingrown toenail story. You must go back and hear the ingrown toenail story. But as I was doing the class last week, during class itself, I've had a lot of wacky health crises, over the summer. For some reason, it happens to me in the summer. Maybe because I'm not teaching school. I don't know. And one thing I've had is a wacky hearing problems. Like it's called fluctuating hearing loss, and my hearing cuts off. There's like a loud, loud tinnitus, and my hearing cuts off, and it feels like half my head is numb, and it's really a horrible feeling. It's really absolutely horrible. And I've and not much is known about it. And so what happens in the middle of class, sometimes it happens so close to class or something like that. And I was thinking, what are you doing? It happened right in class. As I was thinking, oh, great Hashem, right in class. So I stepped out of the room. If you can see during Haskell Shimon's segment, I stepped out of the room and I said, thank you, Hashem. This is happening to me now, and nobody's doing this but you. And if it's from you, it's good. So thank you, Hashem. Thank you for this fluctuating hearing loss. Thank you. Hashem, take it away. Please take it away. And I did exactly what I said, and it went away. It didn't develop into anything. Baruch Hashem. So it's an extraordinarily powerful technique, and I recommend it highly. So anyway, I want to. So why does the Yetzer keep telling us that God is the enemy? Because he doesn't want you to recognize that he is the enemy. Really, it's the Yetzer, and you have to be smart. You have to listen. If you're in a bad mood, it's because you're listening to the Yetzer. There is no other explanation. If you are in a bad mood, you're listening to the Yetzer and his evaluation of your life, and you have to answer him smartly. You can acknowledge what he says, but don't go to his conclusion that God is bad and God has abandoned you, and you better jump ship and you better take care of yourself because nobody else is taking care of you. So anyway, an antidote to the Yetzer is this month that we're in right now, Elul, and Elul, as we know, it's an acronym. It's Aleph. I should have brought in a sign. Aleph. I don't even have a blank piece of paper. Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, and Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. And the word Elul, I think we mentioned last week, it's an acronym for an expression, Ani Lidodi Vidodi Li. I am for my beloved, and my beloved is for me, meaning Hashem. It is the month of rapprochement, getting closer to Hashem, because Hashem doesn't want to be a stranger to us on Rosh Hashana. He needs us on Rosh Hashana. And so he needs us on Rosh Hashana. So let me write it down, Elul. And then, sorry, I'm writing on a scratchy table, so it's not going to be beautiful print. Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. Ani, Lidodi, Vidodi, Li. I am for my beloved, and my beloved is for me. So another thing about Elul is it's an Aramaic word. In Aramaic, it means search. So what are we searching for in Elul? In Elul, a Jew is told to search for Hashem. And how do you search for Hashem? How do you search for someone who's invisible? How do you search for Hashem? So there are many ways to do it. Looking at the kindnesses in your life, listing the kindnesses in your life, marveling over a sunset, marveling over things that only Hashem can do, and talking to Hashem. That's another way to find him. Talking to him copiously. And as we said last week, when you put in effort in this month, Hashem programmed this month. He charged it. It's charged up. It says that God's 13 attributes of mercy are shining down on the Jewish people beginning in the month of Elul. From the beginning of Elul until after Yom Kippur, the 13 attributes of rachamim, of mercy, are shining down on us. And it means that Hashem is more easily accessible. Hashem is accessible 24/7, 365 days a year, but it's easier to access him in Elul. It's easier to access him in the first 10 days of Tishrei, which is from the time from Rosh Hashana to Yom Kippur. So we need to take advantage of this precious time. It is a precious time that only comes once in a year. And we need to talk to Hashem as much as possible. And we need to do more mitzvos if you can. And talk to Hashem in your own words. It's so easy now. You go outside with a cell phone not plugged in. If you don't want anybody to know you're talking to Hashem, just hold it up. It can be off, hold it to your ear and just go and talk to Hashem. Used to be that we didn't have cell phones. And that was the very first piece of Torah advice that I ever got in my life. Talk to God. It was the best piece of advice I ever got. And it continues to be the best piece of best piece of advice. But back then there were no cell phones. So the person who was telling me, Nachum Braverman, who's now a rabbi for Aish Torah, he said, just when you're outside, go into a phone booth. Do you remember phone booths? Does anybody remember phone booths? He said, go into a phone booth and pick up the phone and pretend you're talking to somebody. Now you don't need it. Thank God we have these cell phones. So, so talk to Hashem. It's just such a powerful thing to do. And daven, pray to Hashem. And, it's just an incredible thing. So, so why did Hashem invest so much in Elul? He invested so much in Elul because he needs us on Rosh Hashana. What does he need on Rosh Hashana? Why does he need something? It says that Hashem requests that we make him into our king. What does that mean? Hashem he already does everything. What else? He owns us. What else? So what is a king? In Jewish thought, a king is completely different than in secular thought. In Jewish Torah thought, a king exists only for the people. Doesn't exist for the people to serve him. Yeah, the people do serve him, but he exists only for the people. And a king is not a I'm only thinking Hebrew. He's a melech, not a moshel. He is a king,
he's not a peer.
Not a dictator. No, not a dictator. Hashem doesn't want to be a dictator. Hashem owns everything. Hashem does everything. But on Rosh Hashanah, we vote him into office. We say, we want you. And please be our king for another year, please. And Hashem wants it because he wants this partnership. He doesn't want to be a dictator. He wants a partnership. He wants you to understand that he is for you and you are for him. It's incredibly important. And that we're on the same team. So I want to just stick in a little stuff about Mashiach, that Mashiach is also the longer term is Melech HaMashiach, the King Mashiach. Mashiach is there's supposed to be a long series of kings. The second to the last one is Mashiach, who hands the crown back to the real king, which is Hashem. And okay, good. He hands it back to Hashem, the real king. And that's exactly what Mashiach does. Hashem, he reintroduces who Hashem is to the whole world. And as I told you many times, that the Rebbe told us, the Lubavitcher Rebbe hinted broadly many, many, many times that he is Mashiach and that the grave will have no dominion over him. And what did the Rebbe do? He set up Chabad houses in every tiny corner of the world. First there was one, then there were 5, then there were a dozen. Now there are, I think, at least 4,000 to 5,000 Chabad houses around the world. And not only that, the Rebbe actively sent emissaries to Timbuktu, to tiny little podunk places where there was one Jew, and told them there's a Jew there who needs Hashem. And they came back with the most extraordinary stories, like this guy who said, I'm ready to convert to Christianity unless I got a sign from Hashem. And that day, a Chabad rabbi shows up and finds him, So anyway, and Mashiach is also a collective soul. Just like we are part of Hashem and Hashem is part of us, the soul of Mashiach is a collective soul, and we all have a share in Mashiach's soul. We all have a spark of the soul of Mashiach in us. So this Rosh Hashanah, I invite you to, with me, crown Hashem, ask for Mashiach, say we want to be brought even closer to Hashem. And I'm just going to say that this Shabbos, candle lighting time is 6:57.
Wow.
Rosh Hashanah, which is exactly exactly 1 week from tonight, it starts at 6:52. Candle lighting is 6:52. And it's good to light candles then, not, 6:52. And that's 18 minutes before sunset. We never light after sunset because that's the opposite of a good thing. And then the second night, only if you have a pre-existing flame, because we don't start a new fire on Yontif. We only, if you have an existing, like a what do they call it?
A yard side candle?
Yeah, that's the only name I know, yard side or memorial candle. If you have one that's burning, then you can take it and light new candles from it. You can borrow the flame, but you can't start a new flame. So only if you have something like that, you light the second night. And on the second night, you can't light until after the first day is entirely finished. That means after it's completely dark, which will be after 7:50. So, and on Rosh Hashana, it's a wonderful thing to do all the customs.
9, 1, 7,
and as you know,
9, 6, 9, 4, 8, 9, 7.
Okay, just unplugging the caller ID. So, so it's good to do all the customs, you know, and at the right time. On the first night, as you remember, we dip the apple in honey. We have a round challah and we dip the apple in honey. And why do we dip an apple in honey? Because even though everything Hashem does is good, we don't want just a good year. We don't wish each other just a Shana Tova. We wish each other a Shana Tova Masuka. Why? Because Masuka or Matuka in modern Hebrew means sweet. A lemon is so good for you. It's so good for your health. There's almost nothing better. But is it sweet? No. We're asking Hashem for a year that tastes sweet to us, not something that is bitter, not something that, no. We want not only a good year, but a sweet year also. And on the second night and the first day, we go somewhere and we hear the shofar, because the shofar wakes up the Jewish neshama. It's very important. And then, but you know, do whatever you can to walk there, and go buy yourself one if you want, and just blow it. And on the second night, we eat a new fruit and we say Shechianu before we eat it. And anyway, so I'm going to wish everybody a Shana Tova or Masuka, and I look forward to seeing you a week later, a week after Rosh Hashanah, and wishing everyone all the best.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn off the recording.